Good evening. I'm Barry Bryan, Vice President of Sustainable Rossmore. It is my pleasure to introduce Fran Gibson. Fran is currently serving her third and last year as president of Rossmore Emergency Preparedness Organization, a 30-year-old resident volunteer group whose core mission is helping ready residents to get themselves and their households prepared for a major disaster or emergency striking Rossmore and beyond. She holds a master in public health with honors in medical administration and public health policy. She served as state coordinator of perinatal health education for the South Carolina State Health Department. South Carolina's governor asked her to be the state director of the Mondale Ferrara presidential campaign in 1984. Fran also helped write and pass the state's first domestic violence law. She was a prime mover in gaining legislative funding for South Carolina's high-risk perinatal program, ensuring all women and their infants in her state could receive basic health care services. That program is credited with directly reducing infant and maternal mortality across South Carolina. Fran moved to California in 1987 and went into teaching health science to college students. After retiring, she served as president of two statewide nonprofits devoted to coastal environmental protection and spent 7 years advocating for public coastal access and coastal protections before the California Coastal Commission. She was one of two advocates chosen by Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom to manage his legislative floor plan to defeat fossil fuels efforts to renew offshore oil drilling. After 3 long weeks in Sacramento, the bill was crushed. Fran serves on the city's Measure O campaign committee to help move this ballot measure across the finish line. The Sustainable Rossmore Steering Committee voted 8-1 in support of Measure O. And now, Fran Gibson.
Thank you very much, Barry, for that wonderful and warm introduction. And it is an honor and a privilege to be here, both as a member of Sustainable Rossmore and as a member of the city's Measure O campaign committee. I'm here to explain this ballot initiative to our members who may not have heard of it or do not know much about it. So it's my pleasure to do so. The first question, of course, is what is Measure O? Measure O is a ballot initiative to provide funding to maintain and enhance Walnut Creek services, programs, and facilities. And it includes what I call a long laundry list of issues and challenges ahead: crime prevention, public safety, 911 emergency response services, pedestrian safety, street safety improvements, parks and open space initiatives, youth and senior programs, art and cultural programs, local business support, downtown improvements, an increase in homelessness services, and repairing and replacing aging, recreation, aquatics, and community facilities in our city. And last but not least, sustainable initiatives. Measure O is a half-cent sales tax on purchases of furniture, cars, restaurant tabs, clothing, and gas. It will add then 50 cents to a taxable $100 purchase and will yield $11 million annually for 10 years when the sales tax sunsets, unless it's extended by voters after 10 years. I want everybody to know that it's not city residents who are going to pay all of the sales tax revenue. Half of our sales tax revenue in Walnut Creek comes from visitors. We are a very popular destination spot for art, cultural, and restaurants and other services, shopping adventures that people love to have here. Measure O will yield about 30 cents a day, will cost about 30 cents a day for the average family of 4 in Walnut Creek, but certainly less for us seniors. Necessities like groceries, housing, and prescriptions are exempt from the measure. Measure O will take a simple majority vote. That means 50% yes, plus 1 vote will put it over the finish line. It is a general tax. It's not a special tax, in order to allow City Council to utilize the funds where needed, as needed. The city and Only our city will receive the full amount generated by this half-cent sales tax for a decade. The revenue stays here in Walnut Creek and can only be spent by Walnut Creek leaders, City Council. Measure O requires the city to form a citizens oversight committee of at least 5 members of the public who are either city residents or representatives of Walnut Creek businesses. The city's independent auditors will annually complete a report on both the collection and the expenditure of Measure O revenue. This oversight committee will review and will write a report to the city council on their oversight of how these funds are collected and spent. I like to say Walnut Creek is healthy, but we're not wealthy in terms of budget resources. Walnut Creek is in very good financial shape. We balance our budget each year. We have no general fund debt, and we've set aside rainy day reserves of $14.6 million. Walnut Creek is one of the lowest tax cities in our region. Business and community leaders avidly support Measure O because it helps ensure Walnut Creek's tax rate will remain the lowest in Contra Costa County. And of course, business leaders like that strategy. Measure O will support small businesses, economic recovery, and attract new businesses and jobs. Measure O is endorsed by the Diablo Regional Arts, by the Walnut Creek Chamber of Commerce, by the Walnut Creek Police Association, Walnut Creek Downtown Association, Walnut Creek Civic Pride Foundation, and the Walnut Creek Library Foundation, to just name a few of the larger endorsing groups. No ballot argument against was filed, so it's a very positive, that was a very positive part of the history of how Measure O came to be voted by the City Council to be placed on November 8th's ballot. Let's look a little bit at the history of Walnut Creek and we can understand why this Measure O is so important. Between 1950 and 1980, Walnut Creek built many city facilities. Between 1990 and 2010, the city enjoyed significant budget surpluses, which were used to enhance these new facilities, construct new ones, and to build infrastructure. City Hall was built, Walnut Creek Police Department was built, Veterans Memorial Plaza, downtown Walnut Creek Library, Tice Valley Gym, which is near us, and Lester Center for the Arts. The Great Recession, though, hit in 2008. We all remember that, and it led to major budget cuts, staff reductions, and what the city terms an infrastructure deficit when older facilities that were aging out could not be repaired or replaced. And that's where we find ourselves today. And then, of course, came COVID and the pandemic, and that reduced sales tax revenues for Walnut Creek by $15 million, and that was a major loss as well. The economic prediction for our region and for our city in particular, we're very unlikely to soon return to robust budget reserves. But as I said, and I'll emphasize again, Walnut Creek nonetheless today is fiscally sound. It carries no general fund debt, as I said. It has healthy reserves, and funding is set aside in irrevocable trust to cover future pension costs. The problem, of course, is the budget deficits from the Great Recession and from COVID. Some of you may wonder, and you should wonder, and I did, how we can make certain that the city spends the Measure O revenue funds on that long laundry list of concerns that I listed earlier and that residents both in Rossmore and in Walnut Creek have. I assure you that the campaign committee, which contains some city council members, it contains some major business leaders and some major nonprofits, we will hold the city council's feet to the fire that they will spend this money as promised on the concerns that Walnut Creek residents have already registered. The city did a wide-ranging survey. Many of you got that in your mailbox. I filled it out and sent it back in. They wanted to determine what services and programs are important to people who live in Walnut Creek. And 6,300 residents responded. The city held 50 community meetings and interviews with 500 city stakeholders. So that's a lot of people who will hold the city council's feet to the fire that these funds are spent across the board and not spent for pet projects. I want to end by saying I think the quality of life that we enjoy here in Rossmore that we enjoy here as people living in Walnut Creek is the product of many former decades of foresight by city leaders. And Measure O gives us an opportunity as Rossmorians and as Walnut Creek city residents to ensure that that quality of life continues, and it continues not just for our generation, but for several generations to come. I want to thank you again for having me. It's been an honor. I am proud to be a Sustainable Rossmore member and proud to sit on the city's campaign committee, and let's do all we can to get this important ballot initiative over the finish line. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fran. And I, for one, will vote yes for Measure O.
That's great. Marvelous.